We want to take just a second to get a little input on the diversity course that you're offering as part of the constructivist developmental curriculum at IDR Academy. How is it that you see the approach that you're taking to diversity as fitting in with a general constructivist approach to intercultural relations?
Yeah, in order to answer that, we have to contrast it to how diversity has been approached. It's been approached in a more deterministic way, in a more unidimensional way. We talk about race, Black, Latino, we talk about gender, or we talk about sexual orientation, or nationality, the Germans, the Peruvians, the Americans. But really, we're much more complex than that. We can be a German who grew up in Venezuela, as a Spanish speaker, right? We can be a second, third generation Latino who does not speak Spanish. It can be an African American in an all-white community. It could be a Muslim who grew up in France. And so these deterministic views of our identity do not account for the multidimensionality of who we are, number one. And number two, every one of us makes choices along the way about how we will respond to what we were born with genetically and our interactions with society. And so we may have similar experiences as Muslims in France or Latinos in the U.S., but we will make different choices perhaps about which part of that identity we're going to play more or less. We become more religious in our Islamic faith. We may become more secular, right? We might choose to embrace Latino-ness and learn Spanish if we will grow up English dominant, or we may not. So, and we cannot determine what choices are that people have made. Each person constructs their own identity and therefore their own diversity story. And that's what I mean really by a constructivist view of diversity. There's still societal constructivism that we have to deal with. If society is creating a construct, right, that race matters in a certain way or has a certain meaning, then we have to deal with that and then and recognize that these constructions lead to marginalizing groups of people. And what we're trying to do is trying to break that down and really being able to see people in a more multidimensional way.
So if we're in a position of trying to manage a multicultural group or trying to operate in the multicultural context of some sort, we have to, first of all, appreciate the complexity of that construction. But secondly, I suppose we need to have some way to talk about that.
Oh, absolutely.
In a respectful way.
Yes. And I think, like any constructivist approach, it really starts with allowing people to figure out what their narrative is, what's their story, what meaning do they give to the experiences that they've had, right, and the choices they've made around it, and to really allow for people to make different kinds of choices for all kinds of reasons.
So altogether, this sounds like a much more flexible and less politically driven approach to diversity, although it doesn't fail to approach to deal with political and power issues in relationships. How do you think that this approach might inform the way that we're responding collectively to situations like the Ferguson in the U.S. or the recent Paris attacks?
Yeah, if you look at how the media goes at it in a very deterministic view, a very unidimensional view. It talks about black versus white, right? And really, you look at the protests around Ferguson, New York, there in Gardner, and they were very multicultural protesters who were holding up signs called Black Lives Matter, right? And so there's a very complex thing going on here where it's not just a black versus white thing. When you look at Paris, again, the very right-wing response to that is making it, trying to separate being French from being Muslim, right? And that is one very polarized view. And then we have one of the heroes in the Paris shootings who saved several lives, who happened to be a Muslim, right? Who was in a naturalization process to be a French citizen, and then the government accelerated that to recognize that you could be French and Muslim, and that there's not a contradiction between the two. But that's a really more multidimensional view of identity and diversity.
Well, I'm really very pleased that you will be adding this dimension to what I think is emerging thinking around intercultural issues in general, that we need to be thinking about culture in a more flexible way that this is a construct, that our observations of these things are constructs, and that we therefore have the responsibility to be creating respectful relations. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
See ya.